Well, the rain's finally come, so that's put an end to the stubble shooting, at least for the time being. Although, funnily enough, I was just helping my dad get a load of wood in, and one of the other farms locally has just told me about a field of turnips he's about to plant next week and wants me to knock some more pigeons down, so hopefully there'll be some more of that to come, but I've got a few more to come, videos to come on that anyway. So, finally gotten around to answering your questions, or haven't yet, but I'm about to. So, without any more sort of further ado, let's crack on. So, to start with, King Cheddar 87 asks, do you think law-abiding British citizens should have the right to conceal carry? Well, the thing is, it's kind of a bit of a moot point really, because I wouldn't have a problem with that in principle if people went through the right training and licensing like they do in the States. Not really an issue, especially with the times that we're seeing at the moment where we've got terrorist attacks happening in Europe almost on like a daily basis. That isn't so much of an issue here yet, so, you know, it could maybe come to that, to be honest, but we shall see. But either way, it's really, you've got to start the argument where it starts. I mean, in the UK, it is illegal for anyone to take any kind of precautions to defend themselves. So whilst in principle, you know, if you were being chased around your house by an axe-wielding lunatic and you grabbed a kitchen knife and you know, defended yourself with it, that would be fine. But of course, if somebody had a kitchen knife or, you know, a knife to defend themselves, generally, then they would be done for murder. So it's kind of a bit of a, you know, strange situation in that respect. I know with my mum, she handled she's retired now, but in her life she did handle some quite contentious legal cases involving the IRA and armed robbers and that sort of thing. And she was genuinely worried walking from the court to her car, and also with the police. So to protect herself, she was given a personal alarm, which frankly isn't going to cut the mustard really. Why couldn't somebody like that have some pepper spray? But, you know, it's ridiculous, to be honest. So that's where that would start. So, as I said, it's a moot point, really. It's not, you know, there's no point even talking about that sort of thing. So, there we are. Joe Randella asks, what do you think of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and all that stuff that's going on in America? I myself am paying attention to everything that is happening and hoping Mr. Trump wins, since I'm such a huge supporter of him and of most of what he stands for. Well, yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? In the UK, Trump is like sort of demonised by the media continually as being some sort of lunatic. But what people don't realise is, I mean, certainly with some of the things that he said, he's using classic sales pitch spiel, shall we say, most notably NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And what he's doing is, when he was going through the primaries to become the leader of the Republican Party, he was targeting very specific groups. That's why he said some of the more outlandish things. But given that he had like something like a budget of 20 million for his campaign, going against people like Jeb Bush, who had considerably more money, he completely dominated that campaign, and he got literally billions of dollars of free media coverage by saying outlandish things. So to sort of label him as sort of an idiot or stupid is very naive indeed, you know, despite where his humble, not so humble beginnings, you know, he still made a hell of a lot of money in his life, so he does know what he's doing. For instance, when he said, oh, you know, I'm going to ban all Muslims from America, that was to appeal to a certain very specific demographic in a very specific state. As things have evolved, that's turned into what most people would consider quite sensible, that he doesn't want to take refugees from countries that have got a massive problem at the moment, i.e. Syria, because he doesn't want a repetition of what's going on in Europe and Germany with the mass rapes and all of the you know, suicide bombings, etc. So, as I said, it's kind of, he's evolving. But what you can say about him is, you know, regardless of how you look at things, he is representing himself and what he wants to do for the country. He isn't doing it for money. He's obviously already made his own money. He's not doing it to sort of appease Halliburton and all these other companies. So if it was me, that's who I would go for. When you consider that Hillary is very much ingrained as part of the establishment, she is involved in a lot of very poor decision making with regards to Libya and Iraq. She changes her tune whenever, you know, the sort of public's perception seems to have altered. For instance, she was originally against gay marriage, but then when it became popular to be pro-gay marriage, she changed to that. So my opinion of Hillary really is that she has absolutely no integrity whatsoever. She's bought and paid for by the establishment. She's somebody you should stay well away from. So given the choice, that's who I would probably would go for Trump. But in terms of what he's going to do, It's hard to say. We won't know that until he gets in. But don't panic, because any of these things that he says that seem a bit mad, you know, America has a very specific, division of legislature in the United States. You know, if he wants to put something to be made into law, even if he does it with an executive order, he has to get funding from Congress, and if Congress don't like what he's doing, it's not going to go ahead. So, you know, you're not going to see any of these mad things that people think, you know, he's going to do. So that's the way I see it, anyway. Vlad Teeps asks, if you could move to the USA, would you? I know I certainly would. Yeah, I probably would. The only thing that would put me off would obviously be the healthcare as I got older. I suppose if I wanted to be selfish, I'd go for the whole dual citizenship, so I could just like bugger off back to England when I get old and I need free healthcare. But other than that, yeah, I mean, it's the land of opportunity. You've got proper civil rights. You've got the right to free speech. You've got, obviously, there's the sort of firearm element. You know, it's, I hate to say it, it's a free country, and we don't really live in a free country. So yeah, I probably would head over there. It's not easy though. So if any of you guys who live in the States though want to offer me a job, then by all means make me an offer. I'm more than happy to come over and work for you. John Moore asks, what do you think of the Beretta S55 as a starter gun? I'm not even sure what that is, is that the Silver Pigeon? If it is the Silver Pigeon, yeah, it's a great gun. You know, I mean, in terms of any new shooter, if you're after an over and under, Browning 525, Beretta Silver Pigeon, those are the two best options. So I assume that's what you're talking about anyway. Robert Foote says, greetings from America. Sam, is there any deer hunting on the island? Here in America it's all about whitetail, blacktail and mule deer. He's asking a few other questions as well. I'm going to keep this one question per person because otherwise I'll be here all day. Yeah, there is deer hunting here. If you go to somewhere like Scotland or certain parts of Wales, you can end up spending a huge sum of money. They have shooting estates dedicated to that. But for the more sort of average person, there are a lot of wild deer as well. I know on one of my shooting commissions there's quite a lot of roe. That's a few miles away. But around here locally there's a lot of muntjac as well, which have the little sort of tusks. And they're quite good because you can shoot those by law with a 223 if you want, or a treble 2, as where all other deer in the UK you have to have a 243. I'm actually still waiting to get my ticket back from the police on that. That's a whole other video. I will go into that at some point when I actually have the result of that. But yeah, you can, yeah, absolutely. Most farmers, to be honest, see them as vermin to a certain extent. Yeah, you can do that, yeah. Gabe, fat guy with a katana Masashi asks, if the Britishes ever pulled their heads out of their bottoms and gun laws make sense, like ours for the most part, what would be the first 10 guns you would buy? First 10? I don't know about that really. I don't know where I'd start. I think, to be honest, if I moved to the US, depending where I was, and I was after some sort of rifle for self-defense, I guess, or for home defense, I'd probably go for an AK just because, you know, it's cheap and cheerful, and you know, you'd get you going. And I'd probably buy a Glock as well because, again, it's functional, cheap and cheerful, gets you going. After that, I don't know really. I'd have to look into it. There'd be so many options, wouldn't there? I'd probably want to build my own AR. As far as I can tell, building an AR is a bit like building a PC, so it's quite a nice thing because you can buy your lower for like $40 and then each month buy another bit until you eventually got your sort of dream gun. And obviously there's a lot of functionality there with AR. You know, you can swap to a 300 blackout and have it silenced. That's probably what I would go for, because then you can use that for shooting, you know, wild pigs and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd start with an AK and then go for an AR further down the line. Josh Abbey asks, how can I convince my mum and dad to let me shoot? She's very against hunting and doesn't seem to listen. Well, you need to sort of really kind of ask her where, you know, she thinks her food comes from, where meat comes from, and how ethical it is, how the meat's treated in the abattoir, how hens are treated when they have, you know, they're lined up and have their sort of throats cut and so on and so forth, put into little cages and that sort of thing. When cows go to the abattoir and they're effectively lined up with a sort of river of blood going past them, which means they're terrified, and then by the time they are slaughtered, they're stunned, which is humane. You know, it is humane. They're hung upside down, they're still alive but stunned. They cut their throat and then the heart pumps out all the blood, and that's what makes this river of blood in the first place. But the trouble is, because of that, because of the intensiveness of how they're slaughtered, they're terrified. by the time they're killed, which is why when you buy meat from the supermarket, especially cheap sort of beef, it's usually very tough, and that's because they're so tense when they die. So if you compare that to going out and shooting your own game, and you've got animals which are like way more than free range at that point, they're wild, they have a great life, and then you know, as the hunter, you take the responsibility to do it properly. You know, there could be no logical argument against that, even if you were like a vegetarian and you'll eat meat. How could you be against that? I mean, it's the most ethical thing you could possibly do. And in terms of the shooting as a sport, it is certainly in the UK, and I'd expect in the wider world, it is literally the safest sport you could possibly do. Horse riding, for instance, is very dangerous. Or football or whatever, whatever sport you care to name, the injuries you can sustain are horrendous. Shooting is very safe, and it's one of the only things, if you're going to do competitive shooting, where even though they could, men, women, disabled people, and so on, could compete on a level playing field, which makes it very inclusive. So yeah, I don't know, I guess tell her to watch some of my videos, maybe. SpongeBob Troll Pants asks, what country in your opinion has the best gun laws? Well, the thing is with that is that it's all relative, isn't it? I mean, the UK I think has overly restrictive firearm laws. I don't really have a problem with Section 2. If everything that's Section 1 was brought under a Section 2 type model, i.e. if you're a stand-up citizen, you have a right to have a firearm, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But it's all relative. In the United States that wouldn't work, for the conditions they have in the United States. The Second Amendment is really a must. Any laws that restrict firearms in the United States just put guns in the hands of criminals and take them away from law-abiding people, because guns are like drugs, in the States. They're just ubiquitous, they're everywhere. So no law's going to change that. So making sure that citizens have the right to protect themselves is great in that situation. In terms of overall, if you're going to encourage really responsible firearm ownership, I'd probably go with Switzerland, because they have to do their national service. They're all fully trained. At the end of their training, they're issued with a firearm that they keep for life in case there's ever an invasion. So I suppose in terms of having a population that shoots a lot, that's responsible and knows what they're doing, then the Swiss model would probably be the best. But everywhere's different. Everywhere's different. One thing that works one place isn't going to work another. So it's hard to make a direct comparison, really. Callum Barber asks, can you legally own a Franchi Spaz 12 in the UK? Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's just it's a pump and a semi-auto shotgun, but both pumps and semis are perfectly legal, and so yeah, it would be. You could probably get one in Section 2 if you wanted, if it was restricted to 3-shot. In fact, I think I've seen them on Gun Trader. But of course, you can get a Section 1, so any capacity. So yeah, you can buy them as well. I've seen them for sale. I think I saw one for about 800 quid. It's quite expensive, but yeah, you can get them. Whether you want to shoot one though, probably not. To be honest, from what I've seen of them, they're god awful, really badly made, not very reliable shotguns. To be honest. Anyway. Shooter Down Under asks, name at least one gun you would like to purchase. Well, at the moment, what I'd really like to purchase is a Tikka T3 Hunter, chambered in 243, and as I said, I'm waiting for my ticket to come back from the police. Once it does, I've got the money. Well, at the moment I've got the money, although some various bills have just come up. But I've got the money saved up, so yeah, that's what I'm after. That's what I really want pretty soon, but we shall see. Dave Davies asks, how does a UK citizen obtain and keep a Glock rather than a shotgun? Mad laws. I take it you're from the United States. Well, you can actually. You've got two options really. Under Section 1, as a regular person, you could in theory have a Glock. I know, I can't remember the name of the company now, but there was a company that was making long-barreled Glocks, actually chambered in 2.2, so not officially Glocks, but they were effectively a Glock with a long pencil barrel and an armrest in 2.2. You could have one of those, or if you're a deer stalker, you can apply for a Glock under Section 5, and I know a guy I've been talking with a lot at BAS recently regarding the rifle thing. That's going to be a whole other video. He was actually partly responsible for drafting the latest Home Office guidelines, and he says that's a lot of what he spends his time doing. Is that a lot of police jurisdictions don't want to issue any kind of Section 5 firearm to anyone, but the law says under Home Office guidelines, if you have good reason to own a handgun because you need it for humane dispatch for deer stalking, then you can have one, and lots of people do. So it depends on what it gets accepted, that sort of thing. I know some police jurisdictions there ends up being a compromise where they'll have like a revolver, like a 6-shot revolver in 38, but it'll be blocked, so only 3 chambers work, that sort of thing. Or they'll have a Glock, but the Glock can only hold 3 rounds. But a lot of the time, it's unrestricted, and you'll just have a regular revolver or a regular Glock, or Glock, whatever, self-loading handgun, and they can have that. So yeah, it can be done, but very, very difficult. And as I'm finding out at the moment, a lot of the time it depends where in the country you are and what the police jurisdiction deems okay. And this is where you end up having to get BASC involved. You may even have to threaten them with legal action, which is what is happening with me at the moment, because they do tend to make up their own rules, which is a problem. But that's what it comes from living in the UK. DJ Wave 64 asks, what's the weirdest, scariest thing that's ever happened to you during your hunting and shooting years? I think, well, it's not going to sound very scary at all. One of the scariest things happened was when a wall fell on me. I was shooting around the barns with the air rifle. You'll see some of my older videos. In fact, I did a video where I featured this, basically. But I kind of put my foot up on this bit of old wall next to a barn to try and lift myself up so I could look on the roof, and there are these big bricks to make up this wall, and it all just fell on me. And weirdly, my gun kind of braced the fall to a certain extent and stopped it messing me up too badly. But I did quite hurt my leg, but I got over it. So I guess that's it, really. Not very exciting, to be honest. But as I said before, it's a very safe sport. So as long as you do what you're supposed to be doing, nothing really happens that's scary, hopefully. Although I did have the police called on me once, and a very pretty young police lady came down, and I explained to her what was going on, and she was fine. She was actually quite flirty, strangely enough. So yeah, that's about it, really. Parachute 216 Reg asks, I've sent off my paperwork yesterday and forgot to declare a medical condition, but I've requested a medical report and stated on Form 201 that I will send it. You don't need to request a medical report. You don't need to. You should have declared the medical condition, but you don't need to. You don't need to send off a report. That would be a really bad idea, actually, because that's kind of inferring that you think there's a problem. If a medical report's required, the police will ask for a medical report. All you need to do is specify any medical conditions you've got and specify who your doctor is. The rest of it is up to them. The minute you start asking for a medical report, you're kind of insinuating that you think it might be a problem. So you're kind of making yourself look, dodgy. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. What you can do, you can contact them and let them know to add that to the application. But when the FEA visits, he'll effectively, almost like fill out the thing for you anyway, because he'll be going through it with you at the time. So you could tell him about it then. So I wouldn't worry about it overly. It'll get sorted out. Patrice asks, would you rather live in an Islamic country where you would have to live under Sharia law, but also have something akin to the Second Amendment, or live in a secular country where all guns are banned? Yeah, this is an interesting one from a number of counts, really, because, and a lot of people don't get this, Sharia law isn't really Sharia law. People think that, that it's a sort of specific way of looking at the world. And in principle it would be, wouldn't it? In principle, if you go from the Al-Qaeda mentality of what Sharia law is, you would have no government at all. Or you would have some sort of cleric who just reads the Quran and then and then says that, doesn't interpret it, just says that's what it says in the Quran, that's what the law is. But in reality, Sharia law across the Islamic world is different in every single Islamic country. Even somewhere like Morocco, in theory they have Sharia law, but it's very, very different to the Sharia law of Saudi Arabia, mostly because you've got a difference between Sunnis and Wahhabi Sunnis. So, it varies a lot. And I've been to Islamic countries where they've got supposed Sharia law, which wouldn't be too bad to live for me because I'm a bloke, as long as you don't say too much about politics. But then, not that I would want to live there. But then, referring to the Second Amendment, well, I can't see how that could be compatible, because the whole premise of the Second Amendment is that it's empowering the people to have the freedom to potentially overthrow a tyrannical government, and you generally only have Sharia law in Islamic countries that have, well, relatively tyrannical governments. I mean, even somewhere like Morocco, which is a very peaceful, very nice country, it's still ruled by the king. So that could be tyranny, in which case the Second Amendment would allow you to overthrow that. So I can't see how that would work. But yeah, I would choose anything other than living in a secular country where all guns are banned. That would be annoying, to be honest, especially from a hunting perspective. So Alex Santos asks, which area do you normally hunt? Well, I hunt across Worcestershire and parts of Gloucestershire. So yeah, depends what I get offered. I got offered somewhere else to shoot just this morning as a guy drove past my house. As I said, I was just clearing up some wood. So yeah, it depends. What gear are you currently using for hunting, e.g. Type of air rifle, pellets, knife, shotgun cartridges, etc.? That's quite an open question. For my air rifle, I would always use generally Webley AccuPals, mostly because they're the one type of pellet that shoots reasonably accurately out of my gun, but it's still not great at the moment, if I'm brutally honest. My knife, I generally will carry my Opinel. If I'm shooting rabbits, I'll take my Eka swing blade, because that has a nice gutting hook on it, which is very useful. And shotgun cartridges, at the moment I'm shooting Ely Pigeon Select 32 gram number 6 5 wad, and they're quite good, 54 quid for 250, so they do the job, you know. But I'll use anything really. I'm not that fussy. It's like when people ask me about, oh, using a pump all the time, pigeon shooting lately, and it's like, yeah, because it fits me and it works. I don't care what sort of gun it is, I don't care what sort of ammo it is, and I don't care what sort of knife it is, as long as it does what I need it to do, to be honest. Mopiox Z asks, sorry, I've really probably butchered your name. Will you ever do a review of your Browning 525? Yeah, I will. I probably will. The trouble is, it's not the easiest thing to do a review on, because it's not what kind of test can I do in a video that would be cool. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? I could shoot some clay pigeons, but nobody wants to watch clay pigeon shooting. I guess I could talk about it, have it on the tabletop, and then overlay some clips of me pigeon shooting with it, I guess. So yeah, that's something I will do at some point, because let's be honest, it's clickbait, isn't it? People will watch that, so yeah, it's something I'll consider. Monic asks, can I have a shout out? Your channel is great. Well, you just had one, Monic. Hi. Hugo Brown asks, how hard is it to convert a shotgun that was 5+1 that got restricted 2+1 back to 5+1? You can't. Once a gun is section 1, it can't be turned back to section 2. So if it was 5+1, it's section 1, and it's always going to be section 1, no matter what you do to it. If it's 2+1, so it's section 2, you can have it unrestricted, and then it becomes a section 1. But once again, as it becomes a section 1, it can never go back. I would always say that's a really bad idea. If you've got a section 2 shotgun at the moment, and you might love it, and you want it to be made section 1, what I would suggest is selling it and buying the same gun again that's already section 1, because you will do that, and then you will also have probably 100 or so quid profit, because section 1 guns are not really worth very much compared to section 2. Section 2 shotguns hold their value a lot better, so I wouldn't do that if I were you. Cozy Man, what got you into shooting? Well, it's like shooting. I mean, I've always been around firearms and hunting and that sort of thing, and the country life. So they've just always been around, really. I got into it, like really into it, in recent years, and you'll see on my videos. Nearly 7 years ago, when I was about 30, because my dad bought me my Browning 525 for my 30th birthday, and that isn't a normal present, but my brother, I think, got given some money for something, and so he decided to do that. So yeah, that's what how I got into it in recent years. I did spend quite a long time not really shooting much at all during my 20s, so yeah. A5 Tereth asks, do you trust Theresa May to deliver Brexit, and do you think the Home Office will find excuses to enforce EU gun legislation on us despite us supposedly leaving the EU? I don't think the Home Office will enforce any kind of EU gun legislation while we're outside the EU, and I actually think if we were still in the EU, I'm not sure it would have happened even then, only because it's ironic really, but our anti-gun government, or they're not necessarily all anti-gun, but those who are anti-gun in government always pride themselves on saying, you know, we have the most restrictive gun laws in the world and we want to keep them that way. And they take exception a bit to having a load of like Johnny foreigners telling them to change their gun laws, because they, you know, there's almost this like arrogance there that they've kind of done it perfectly. So I don't think that would have been particularly an issue. Theresa May, however, delivering Brexit, I'm of two minds really, because in terms of the rhetoric when she came in, I would have said she was great. I think she is great as a leader. I think she's really turning into like Maggie Thatcher Mark II, and it's ironic because if Trump gets into the United States, it's going to be like having Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher back, where we've got Trump and Theresa May, strangely. So all her rhetoric's been right, she's been saying she's definitely doing it, but the thing is she hasn't actually done it yet. She does seem to be stalling a lot, so it is something I'm a little bit concerned about. We'll have to see. Dylan Feliciano says, what's your favourite game meat? I would say definitely would say venison. I love venison in any form, but venison burgers, for instance, are fantastic. It's like having a really nice beef burger, but without any of the fat, basically. It's delicious. I love it. So yeah, venison. Motomedi Hunting and Motocross asks, peas with pigeons. You're in for a treat. They feed well on them, trust me. I do a lot of pea pigeons when they are drilled in and whilst growing, and when harvested, plenty of shooting. Don't stop on peas at all. Pigeons non-stop feeding on them all day, on day one. Yes, pigeons love peas. Is what I can take from that. Not really a question, but yeah, they do. They love peas. They love them if you get it at the right point. But it does depend if they found them, because if it goes beyond a certain point, like when they're sprouting, when they sprout, the pigeons love them. But going beyond that, they don't so much. So it depends on if they just notice them, really. Reese Lightning asks, show us your collection of guns and stuff. Well, I can't really do that now, but yeah, it might be something I'll do in the future. Scotteration Exec asks, do you think that Brexit will make things better or worse for gun ownership in your country? I've asked about 10 people this and gotten different answers. We'd love to know your take on it. Yeah, I don't think, as I just said before, I don't think it will make any difference whatsoever, to be honest. We certainly won't get anything, you know, any relaxation by any means. But I don't believe even these EU laws coming in would have directly affected us, particularly, to be honest. So, Harold Davis asks, I'm 15 and thinking about getting a shotgun certificate. What's the point in under 18s getting one when you can't buy a shotgun until you're 18? Well, that's true, but you can get your dad or somebody else to buy it for you. So you can do that. Obviously, he needs to have a license to do that. But yeah, you can do that, no problem. Boomstick asks, alright, nice and simple. What's your UK-friendly EDC knife of choice? For what it's worth, mine is a Kimber Cordovan UK. So much usability in a relatively compact package. And by volley, it's far nicer than in the flesh. And any videos or pics would lead you to think. Right, okay. Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I haven't got my car keys on me, but what I have is I have an open-all that's literally about that long, and I have it on my car keys, and I wouldn't generally carry anything other than that. The reason being is, even though the law says if it's less than 3 inches and it's non-locking, you can carry it, the trouble is, what people don't realise is, if the police pulled you over with that, it still could be considered evidence, because whilst, yes, you can legally carry it without a good reason, if they think that the reason you've got it is because you want to do something, you know, dodgy with it, they can still arrest you for it, and they can still take you down the station. So, unfortunately, it's something I would avoid. I mean, ironically, if you take, say, the Spyderco UK penknife that I reviewed not long ago, that's UK legal. But if they pulled you with that, they would think that was really dodgy. In contrast, if they found an open-all which isn't legal, it's locking and it's longer than 3 inches, it looks like a functional thing you're going to use as a tool. So the chances are they probably wouldn't be that bothered by it. This is the trouble with the UK police, because the UK police do have a tendency to kind of kind of basically make up their own rules a lot of the time. So I wouldn't risk it, to be honest. 870 Boy 12 asks, if you hunt deer in Britain, do you need a permit? Also, is there regulation on black powder? You don't need a permit, no, to shoot deer, but there are seasons, and it can be quite complicated, which is why a lot of people do their DSC1. If you're shooting Chinese water deer or muntjac, they're basically considered vermin, so you can just shoot them all year. Anything other than that, it gets more difficult, because like roe deer, for instance, there's a different season for the bucks and the does, and all sorts of things like that. So you need to know what you're doing, but no, you don't need a permit as such. We don't really have that in the UK for anything, really, I don't think. We just have seasons. So, what do you think is the best 2.2 long rifle for rabbit hunting? Well, I use CCI subsonics with 40 grains. They do the job brilliantly. Those Winchester 42 grain rounds that I tested not long ago are pretty formidable, to be honest, but they don't seem to be quite as accurate. But in terms of being hard hitting, they do the job. But really, I mean, any subsonic 2.2 is going to do the job. So as long as you can hit something with it, that's all you need to worry about. Reese Lightning asks, are you a UKIP supporter? I would say no, but if they do back out on Brexit, that could change imminently, and I think that will change for a lot of people. But no, I'm not at the moment. Lewis John Williams asks, what over and under shotgun would you suggest for a beginner wood pigeon shooter? And what budget would you suggest a bite gun? I would say, basically, as I said before, Beretta Silver Pigeon, Browning 525, those are the two budget shotguns you should be looking at, and you're looking at about £1,200–1,300, something like that, unless you get one second hand. So it sounds a lot of money, but if you're looking at something that's going to last you your whole life, then it's worth the investment. So, Monic asks, I'm sure you've already asked one question, Monic, will you make a second channel, like a vlog one? Well, as it goes, something I've been considering. You may notice that I do occasionally do sort of political type videos, and I've been looking at various styles of video making different vloggers have been using. Moreover, I've been really looking at kind of the potential audience these people tap into. So it's something I've thought about, and I do sort of have another channel. It's called TheNakedTruth, so you're welcome to look that up. I've only literally got one video on there at the moment, and I did it ages ago, but it is something I'm thinking about adding to. To give you an example, I was thinking about doing a video about the Young Turks. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of them, but they are literally the biggest news media YouTube channel in the world, and it's run by a guy called Cenk Uygur. Now, it's your typical wishy-washy, ultra-left-wing, ultra-bias news media. I mean, it's like the left's version of Fox News, effectively. I mean, they totally misrepresent the news a lot of the time. But it's interesting because Cenk Uygur is an Armenian Holocaust denier. He denies that ever happened, primarily, I guess, because he's Turkish. And nobody really cares. But the thing is, coming from someone who's really wishy-washy left-wing, that's quite extreme. And then you consider, where does the name the Young Turks come from? Well, the Young Turks, the name the Young Turks, comes from the Young Turk Uprising of 1908, which is the direct precursor to the Armenian genocide. So not only does Cenk Uygur support the Armenian Holocaust, he actually named his entire franchise after the people that did it. So I've thought about doing a video about that, so keep your eyes open. Ryan Marr asks, do you think wearing camouflage gives you an advantage? If so, what patterns would you recommend? I don't think it really does at all, really, to be honest. I think as long as you're wearing dark colours, greens, browns, that sort of thing, I don't think it really makes much difference particularly. I mean, maybe if you're shooting foxes it might. Wood pigeon and rabbits, not so much. As long as you're wearing suitably drab kind of colours, that's really enough. Other than that, you know, the most important thing really is just don't move. You know, if you move, they'll see you, because that's what they've evolved to do. They have monocular vision. They don't really have depth perception, say rabbits or wood pigeon, that sort of thing. But they do see movement really, really well. So that's what you've got to concentrate on. George Prince asks, I'm not going to ask any questions about the political state of the world because it's pretty bloody bleak. I'm doing a level 3 diploma in game management in September, and I wanted to know what is a good pair of hunting or beating wellies. Good luck with hunting if you've got the good work on YouTube. I would say, and it's very controversial, I would say the Jack Pipe Huntsman wellies, which you might have seen me on various videos wearing before, and I only say that from my own experience because they've been really good, you know, and they were cheap. They were like 60 quid, and the specification, if you bought the equivalent Hunter wellies that were that specification, you could pay a couple of £100. The only reason I have slight trepidation saying that is mine have been fine, but I know my friend Tom has exactly the same wellies and his fell apart after about 2 years. So, you know, take the chance. Other than that, yeah, just buy some Hunters if you can afford it. Zaspest7 asks, could I pop over to Ireland and then buy some handguns over there and then ferry them into the UK? No. I said you could, in principle, but the thing is, even though you're ferrying them, because of security reasons, not so much reasons of customs, because of security you would have to declare them, and when you declared them, then you would have to have very good reason to be bringing them into the British Isles because they are Section 5 here. If you were, I don't know, if you were shooting at an MOD range and there was some special dispensation and you had a letter and stuff, you possibly could. I don't know. Try it. But obviously you would have to be licensed in Ireland to own those firearms. You couldn't just pop over there and buy them and bring them back. That would be daft. Everything Airgun asks, do you think the airgun licence will come into the UK? No, I don't. Not as long as we have a Conservative government. And looking at Labour at the moment, I mean, you know, it's just enough, they're not even going to get in, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. If Jeremy Corbyn got into power, which is never going to happen, but if it did, yeah, I mean, he would ban everything. You know, he's proper, typical, limberistic 1970s Labour hardcore socialist, so yeah, he's capable of anything, but he's not going to get in, so don't worry about it. 0306 Dandan asks, how is it? I used to work for a big remover company and I've seen at less than 3 loaded shotguns and 2 times they went off in the van. Just seems like posh people getting away with things. I couldn't dream of that. You need a safer one of those. You're meant to keep it loaded. Not meant to keep it loaded. Yeah. Not brilliantly written there, to be honest, mate. But yeah, that's terrible. What more can I say? Very unusual. But I suppose some people do that. They just put their guns away loaded. That's pretty daft, especially in the safe. But you know, guess that happens. Adam Moore asks, if it was down to you, Trump or Clinton? I've already answered that, so read back, but yeah, Trump. The Great Downhiller asks, how do you inform the police when you get a new gun? Well, you get a form will be given to you in the shop. They send off a form themselves, or they do it electronically probably, and they give you a form with all the details on, and you just sign it, and then you just post it off to the police. You can email them though. If you ask for FEO, they often do have an email system. But whatever you do with the email, if they do that, they'll have, you know, you can ask them to sign it to say they've received it or whatever, or to offer a receipt. And if you do send it through the post, make sure you do a recorded delivery, just so you've got a record of it. So, yeah, it's dead simple, really. Robbie Woods asks, will you be doing any cooking game vids, or do you just feed the ferrets? I've done a few cooking videos. If you look back through my catalogue, I've done the odd one. I'm not the best at cooking, though, if I'm honest, but I am thinking about doing some footage of the smoker when my dad smokes some meat, so keep your eyes open for that. Volklak asks, do landowners with deer on their land generally require you to have a deer stalking certificate before granting you shooting permissions? Do you generally require you to pay a fee to hunt on their land? Well, and then he just goes on to say, in Britain there's a perception that shooting and hunting are activities for toffs. Well, it depends. If you go to shoot on a big shooting estate in Scotland, then you'll have to pay a lot of money. Some of them might require a DSC1, not many. If you shoot on land where it's just a farmer who's got deer on his land, then no, he won't care whether you've got a deer stalking licence or anything like that. All he'll care about is, have you got a rifle that you can shoot them with? Because farmers don't generally like deer because they damage fences and trees and cause quite a lot of problems, really. And if they get cut of the meat, then they're more than happy to deal with that. That's in my experience anyway. So, David Cox asks, which is more recoil, 12 gauge or 20 gauge? Well, I think that's pretty easy to answer. And he says, yeah, I guess the simple answer is 12, but as a 20 gauge gun is lighter, if you're shooting a heavy load out of a 20 gauge, would it have more recoil than equivalent out of a 12 gauge? Well, this is interesting because I actually have half the footage for a video called 24 Shotguns Explained, which I'm wanting to do, but for the practical bit, I need Tom to help me, and it's just getting him available on a Sunday when we've got somewhere available and it's not raining to do it, and we just haven't done it yet. But I have bought, both in 12 gauge and in 20 gauge, 32 grams of number 5 Ely cartridges, so they're the same weight, the same shot size and the same make, and I've shot them out of both guns. Now you would have expected, wouldn't you, that the 20 ball would be considerably more recoil than the 12 because it's a much tiny little gun and it's the same load, but actually when I actually fired it, the 12 ball still had loads more recoil. So I can only imagine that whilst they were the same spec and the same manufacturer, there was just less powder in the 20 gauge, I guess. I don't know why that would be, but you know, even in the shop they said, yeah, that's going to really kick through a 20, but it really didn't. It was fine. It wasn't much more than a 410, really. XEMAX M6 asks, looking to purchase a gun save strip cabinet. Srspower, watched your video about your gun cabinet save and found it very useful. You said it was a Bratton Sound, probably spelt it wrong, cabinet. Just want to ask you, has it lasted the test of time, and if you had any problems with it? No, not at all. It just works. It's a cabinet. it's really good. Yeah, it's got 4 big strong bolts. I've never had any problems with it at all. George Buckingham asks, how do you get on with the rubber stock extension on your SXP? Heard mixed things about them. Right, okay. Yeah, it's brilliant, I have to say. When I first put it on, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a bit wobbly or whatever, but it transformed that gun because the stock was way too short, and putting that extra bit on it really helped. And to be honest, I've used it on my over and under as well, and that gave me a little bit more length of pull. My finger was around the trigger when I had the stock here, and now it just touches the trigger, and it's much easier to get behind it, because I do have quite a freakishly long neck, which means it's hard for me to get behind the gun, so having that extra length really helps me get behind it. So yeah, really good. Swampland Films asks, not a question really, but you should do videos where you get people from other countries into a video chat or something and compare gun and hunting laws between those countries. Yeah, I might do a hangout at some point when I've got time, so watch this space. Lewis Freeman asks, what is happening with EU firearms laws? When are they coming into effect, and will there be grandad rights? We're not going to have any EU firearms laws because we've left the EU, and I don't think they would have come in anyway. Any ideas or recommendations on how to get into gunsmithing as a career in the UK? No idea. Ask your local college, I guess. Asking the local gunsmiths. Pigeon Shooting and Fishing the Pigeon and Fishing channel asks, how old were you when you had your first shotgun over 410? What was the first thing you shot? I don't know what the first thing I shot was, and I never actually owned a shotgun until I was 30 when I got my Browning 525. Other than that, I would just use guns that were available at the time. So, Wesley Brooker asks, when you get your 243, will you shoot on permissions, or will you go to pay on stalking trips on estates? Also, I'm very excited about the 243 on this channel. Sort of time we're expecting you to get your licence back from the police, and you don't mind me asking. Well, as I said, it's a bit of a contentious issue because they wouldn't let me have a 243 because it's centre fire without mentoring. So I contacted Basque, and then they've written me a templated letter to send off to them, which really kind of kicks their arse, really. Especially seeing as the guy from Basque was actually partly responsible for drafting the Home Office guidelines. So essentially, the ball's in their court at the moment. If they refuse, then I'm taking them to court. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, and I won't be paying to shoot on any estate. So I've got permission with some row on it, and there's permissions around here which have got munkjack, so I'll do that. Although before I do that, obviously I'll probably spend quite a lot of time training with it before I actually start using it to hunt with. Dan Morris asks, would you consider doing any foxing videos on your channel, or even deer stalking? I will do when I get my 243. Alex S asks, are all rimfire calibers allowed in semi-automatic, or only 2.2 here in the UK? What's your opinion about antique revolvers that haven't been banned? Yeah, you can have any kind of 2.2 rimfire in semi-automatic, because the people who obviously wrote the legislation were really very clued up. And you still get this with the police now, because when you ask for a semi-automatic 2.2 long rifle, they'll just put 2.2 RF. on your license. Not unknowingly, meaning that you can have 22 Magnum for that, which is a very powerful cartridge in comparison. And it's strange because, you know, often you'll have to really convince an FEO to let you have a 17 HMR, and that's less powerful than the 22 Magnum, but because they just don't realise they exist, because they're a bit ignorant, really. So yeah, they are allowed, but nothing else. It has to be 2.2, because that's how the legislation was drafted. Antique revolvers, I don't particularly have an opinion. I know there's a lot of, you know, they are used in crime with, you know, because they have obsolete calibers, they're allowed, but then certain people have been loading them. I don't know really how you would fix that, to be honest, because again, it's like the American analogy, because they're antique and because they don't have to be registered, they're going to be everywhere without us knowing where they are, so it's a difficult one. Jack Davis asks, will you ever do a giveaway competition for a fan to come shooting with you? Maybe, see what happens. John Brown asks, hi Sam, I have a question for you. When I first started pigeon shooting, when I was young, I used this old bolt action 410. Paper cartridges were still quite common back then, mid-80s, and after firing them they would have a tiny pinhole on the side of the cartridge, about 6-10 millimetres above the brass. My grandma never found out what caused it, and neither have I. Maybe just an old combination of the paper 3-inch cartridge and an old gun. Maybe it was an old trait in that model, maybe, I believe. I've no idea. The gun never missed a beat and shot flawlessly. Yeah, I don't know. Don't know, I don't shoot paper cartridges. Jack McKenna asks, I'm 15 years old, what shotgun and cartridge would you recommend for me for pigeon shooting? Well, if you can handle it, any 12 gauge that fits you and you can afford, preferably a Beretta Silver Pigeon or a Browning 525. The cartridge, it just depends on what you're shooting at. Most things, number 6, 30 gram, should do the job. Phoenix Gaming OG asks, I'm 16 and have wanted to get into field sports for about a year. I'm thinking about getting an air rifle, as my granddad already has a PCP kit and used to target shoot on a competitive level. Any tips on gear, guns and how to get permission? Love the channel, reply would be valued, thanks. Okay. Any tips on gear, guns and how to get permission? Well, I've done a video on how to get shooting permissions, so I'd say watch that. In terms of gear, I mean, any PCP air rifle these days is pretty good. Yeah, I mean, get a diver's tank, make sure that it's in test, and away you go, to be honest. Alex B asks, hey Sam, no question, just wanted to say, love your channel and your dedication, mate, keep up the good work. Thanks, Alex. Thanks a lot. Dean Bailey asks, how many shooting permissions do you have and how did you come across them? Well, let me think. I mean, it sort of varies really, but I mean, I've got, locally here, I've got 2. I've got another one a few miles away. I've got 3 like main ones, I would say. But more casually, I have a couple of others in Gloucestershire. So, yeah, it depends. A lot of the time with farmers, it depends on what they need doing and when. So, occasionally I'll get calls. Depends. What kind of handguns are easy to purchase? I've kind of run through this, Alex Santos, sorry. I've run through this before about the UK handgun laws, but basically you're talking about any kind of semi-automatic 2.2 with a long barrel, a 12-inch barrel and an armrest, or any caliber potentially revolver. So you're talking really about 357 or 44 Magnum, Taurus, because they're the only ones that come into the country. And again, the long barrel and the armrest. And that's into section 1. John Reed asks, it was touched on before, but I know that self-defence isn't an acceptable reason to have a firearm in the UK. Coming from the US, it's an acceptable reason in most localities, while in others, you have to show a genuine need for it in self-defence. With all the terrorist attacks on the continent, don't you think that this is something that could change in the UK? I'd really enjoy hearing your thoughts, either way. I think it could change. I'm going to stop for a cigarette now. I don't normally smoke on videos nowadays, but when it's this long, I'm going to have to. Don't smoke, it's bad for you. Or at least until you're 18, make your own decision, but don't do it until you're 18. Anyway, yeah, it could change, maybe. I mean, we're quite lucky here because we're an island, and we're lucky because David Cameron, when he was the Prime Minister, didn't jump on the bandwagon with the rest of the EU and with Germany, letting in God knows how many hundreds of thousands of refugees. So we don't have so much of a problem because instead he suggested, quite rightly, putting the money actually in the refugee camps next to Syria to help the people who actually really needed it, rather than the people who had loads of money to be able to get here in the first place. So it's not so much of a problem, but who knows, it could change. It could change. I mean, it's been quite shocking, the amount of terrorist attacks that have happened in France and Germany in recent weeks. So we will see. What was the most pigeons you have shot in one day? Me, myself, I think 44. If you look at a video I did called Feral Pigeon Shooting, you should see that day. That was a mad day. Next to a field of turnips, strangely. And it's the same guy I just saw this morning who offered me some more shooting, who I was shooting over, next to before, who had some turnips. So, yeah, it could be quite good. RHB Wilderness Outdoorsman asks, would you ever consider doing a raffle or contest and the winner gets to go decoying or something with you? I think it's already been asked. Maybe. What was your background? How did you get into shooting? What's my background? I live in the countryside. How did I get into shooting? Well, it was just always about around. Oh, okay, could you do a video about hunting with a 410? Maybe. It's good as a garden gun. I wouldn't say it's the best thing, as I've spoken about before, for general shooting, but depends on the circumstances, so if I need to, I might. Can you tell us a backstory about your signet ring, please? Especially since you're left-handed but wear it on your left hand. That's from Blue Bottle 001. This was actually lent to me by my great uncle, and it's his sort of signature. It's designed for when you put a bit of wax on a letter and you can just press it in to put your mark on the letter. And I've had it since I was 16. He left it to me when he died. It's a real pain in the arse though, because he was worth a lot of money, and he left it all to a very posh school. So yeah, it's kind of annoying, really. But that's life. It's his money. He can do what he likes with it, I guess. But I got a ring anyway. Tom Green asks, hi Sam, do you have a gun dog? If so, what breed? And if you don't, would you think about getting one? Great videos, by the way. I've got half a gun dog. I've got my dog Lucy, which is a cross between a collie and a Labrador, so half gun dog. And she actually points really well. I've taken her out on the pheasants before. To be honest though, I really don't think that I've got the patience to do it, to be honest. It's such dedication to train a really good gun dog. But who knows, that could change. Oh, you hear the rain? It's just started again. Hopefully it won't interfere too much. That's weird. It doesn't be raining heavily outside. Hopefully you can still hear me. It's raining. The Great Downhiller asks, how do you inform the police when you get a new gun? I've already answered that. You send off a form. Andrew Penny asks, going to get some footage with a Srspower and perhaps do some reviews on various makes models. It's something I've considered actually. Yeah, it'd be quite handy. Maybe. We shall see. I've got other priorities, unfortunately, in terms of buying guns, but yeah, I would quite fancy a silent shotgun. I think that would have a lot of potential use, especially around barns and things. Because I know at my one commission, there isn't a lot of pigeon shooting generally, but there's loads and loads of ferals and doves that come into the barns, and if you just stand at the mouth of one barn going out onto the field, you could shoot loads in a day there. But obviously it's a bit close to the buildings and the horses and stuff, so having a silent shotgun would come in handy. So maybe we shall see. Fish Tropics asks, can you go on a driven day this season to spice up the channel? Maybe. There's a pheasant shoot nearby to here. I shoot on the same land that the pheasants are raised on, and it's possible, maybe. I'd have to sort of contribute to their syndicate one way or another, so we shall see. Smug Barbecue asks, what's your top 3 movies? I don't know really. I tell you what, my favourite movie at the moment is Walking the Line, and it got what's his name? River Phoenix. I've probably pronounced that completely wrong, something like that. River Phoenix's brother, who's a fantastic actor. I mean, he was in Gladiator, and he played this sort of Weasley guy in that. And really watching Walking the Line made you realise how fantastically gifted he is as an actor, because he just became Johnny Cash. I mean, it was incredible. His facial expressions, everything. He was Johnny Cash. You could, even just to look at him, never mind everything else, he was just became that guy, and he was incredible. So, watch that if you like Johnny Cash. What country do you live in? Oh, what county? What country should know that? What county do you live in? Just wondering. I live in Worcestershire. You should all know that. That's from, Hugo Brown. Corey Honnis asks, how do you get into shooting pigeons, crows, and how would you advise someone who wishes to do the same? Well, I got into shooting pigeons and crows because those are the most common things that are needing to be shot around here, especially with the shotgun. So that was why, really. And you want to do the same, well, I don't know, get permission to do it somewhere. Find a field that's being hammered by pigeons and go knock on the farmer's door and say, oh, I can go and shoot those if you want, and see what he says. If you can network, that's really good. But again, I've done a video on this, so just check that out. I'll put it in the description because I'm getting a few questions on this, how to get shooting permissions, but I do go into that in more detail. Murray Harris asks, what do you think of the 243 calibre? Well, it's strange because I've shot loads of 30 cal. I've never actually shot 243, even though I've got one down and I'm going to buy one. From what I can gather, though, it's a fantastic cartridge because it is effectively a neck down 30 calibre, so you've got a huge amount of power. You've still got a big old lump of lead, but it flies really fast and really flat. It's almost like the 17 HMR of the centerfire world, in terms of it's like a full power cartridge with a smaller projectile, so it gets you really good ballistics and obviously not so much recoil. So from what I can gather, it's a fantastic calibre, but I'll have to see when I get one. Liam Clark asks, PM, as she's now called, hasn't triggered Article 50 yet. The BBC says the UK still exists. SNP may not fully exist until 2019. So if the EU started to ban semi-autos and other legislation, will the UK have to follow? Well, and also what are your thoughts on 9mm Flobbert for humane dispatch? I'll say the 9mm Flobbert's pointless. Just use a 410. Just doesn't have enough power, to be honest, from what I've seen. But it depends, I suppose. If you're shooting a rat, it's probably alright. In terms of the Article 50 thing, yeah, it's a very strange one, isn't it? Because on one hand, we've got the government saying we can't invoke Article 50 because, we need to sort of discuss and organise things in the EU before we do. But yet the EU are saying, no, trigger Article 50, then we start talking about it, which is specifically what it's for. It's supposed to trigger Article 50, and then there's 2 years to thrash out all your new trade agreements with the EU. So, what the hell? I mean, trigger Article 50. I mean, there's no need to do anything before Article 50. In fact, you can't do anything before you trigger Article 50 because we're still in the EU until we trigger Article 50. This is one of the things that I'm worried about with Theresa May, because I think she's stalling one way or another, even though she says that she intends to take us out. We're not seeing it yet, are we? And I thought David Cameron was very weaselly in not triggering Article 50, because what he should have done was, they said, right, the people have spoken, we're going to leave the EU, I will now trigger Article 50 and then I'll step down. And he should have done that straight away, and then we should have just carried on from there. That's my opinion, anyway. Dan Morris asks, also, what happens to doing a review on your long-barreled revolver? Yeah, again, this is trying to get Tom out on Sunday and sort it out. You may not know this, but with a Section 1 firearm, I can't just borrow it. If it was Section 2, I could. But being Section 1, Tom needs to be there for me to do it. And it's getting him to do it is a nightmare, to be honest. And also, it's like, we can't do it on a Sunday, because that's club day, so there'll be loads of people around and loads of gunfire. So we need to do it somewhere when it's quiet, and trying to get him, like on a, say, Saturday tea time or something, trying to get him to be around at that time is very hard. So that's why there's a delay. Shooter Lee asks, apologies if this question has been asked previously, what semi-auto shotgun would you recommend for clays for approximately 500 quid? New? I wouldn't recommend anything for £500 new semi-automatic, to be honest. You could buy a Hatsan, maybe, but I don't hear good things about them, if I'm honest. I mean, they're supposedly functional, but from what I can gather, the build quality is not fantastic. If I was going to spend 500 quid on a semi-auto, I would buy a Beretta A300 or something like that. Something second-hand that I know will work. That's what I would do. The Great Downhiller asks, how many and what shotguns and rifles do you have? Well, I've got 2 shotguns, I've got a rimfire and an air rifle at the moment. So my pump, my over and under, and my 2.2 rimfire, which is my Browning T-bolt, and yeah, my Air Arms S310 air rifle. Negro Sheen asks, how big is your barrel? Well, it depends what you're talking about, doesn't it? It varies in length. Wildlife Videos asks, do you get paid for the shooting you do on other people's land? No, we don't get paid for it. It's not really the done thing. When we were children, the guy who had a lot of the land around here used to give my brother a constant supply of shotgun cartridges for free to sort of help him out. But other than that, no, it's not really the done thing. In fact, it's more the done thing that you then buy them a bottle of whiskey at Christmas to say thank you for letting you shoot. So, no, unfortunately not. NJ Kerr asks, when shooting pigeons, do you use an over and under or semi or side by side, and what choke and ammo? I really kind of suggest, mate, that you kind of watch a few of my videos, that you might be able to sort of decide that for yourself. At the moment, I'm shooting a pump most of the time, but I don't care really. I'll shoot anything as long as it fits me and I can hit things with it. I don't really care whether it's a pump, side by side, whatever. I'll shoot whatever, really, to be honest. Jack McKenna asks, can you make a video about how you clean your rifle? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. You just run the pull-through through it, really. But yeah, I could do that. Yeah, why not? Hobo Joe and the Bean Team asks, I've recently read that more police are being armed in London. Apparently, 2,800 officers so far. There's also evidence of other officers across the UK now carrying firearms. The reason being used, of course, is risk of terrorism. Do you think that it's the start of militarisation of police, much like we've seen in the States over the last few years? And also, if so, what effect do you think it'll have on UK gun owners in the future if indeed we are following the footsteps of the States? I don't see any real evidence for that, to be honest. Most police I've spoken to are quite anti being armed, and most of the feedback that we're hearing from various police bodies is that they don't really want to be armed, to be honest, because they feel that could become an escalation, as you just pointed out. So I don't really see it, to be honest. It would make me nervous, because from what I've seen in my experience is the police in the UK, in terms of their armed response, they spend a lot of time learning and training about how to sort of speak to people and handle a situation and knowing when to shoot, but without very much training in terms of being good at shooting and being good at safety as well. I won't go into why, but yeah, I don't have a great deal of confidence in the armed police, and also I think if there was a terrorist attack, much like we've seen in, originally in Mumbai in India when they went on a proper rampage, or we saw Charlie Hebdo in France, I think our police would be hugely outmatched, because the guys shooting at them wouldn't be some sole nutter who's gone on a shooting spree. It'll be people who are battle hardened and trained how to fight with a firearm. And our police don't know how to fight with a firearm. They don't. They just know how to crowd around one person and tell them to put the gun down, basically, or stand outside a building where someone's going nuts and waiting for them to kill everyone before they go in and do anything. So it does worry me, to be honest. I think they need to have far more training, and I think that armed police officers should be able to take their firearms home with them and use them at a club so they can get some proper training, because at the moment I don't have a lot of confidence, to be honest. Do you think that they should have Shot My Brother Haram? I don't know who that is. I do keep fairly abreast of the news, but I don't know. Enlighten me in the comments. Handguns UK, how's your mate Tom? I haven't seen him for a while. You make a great double act. Hope everything is okay. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Yeah, Tom's really busy. He works a 6-day week selling cars, and he's just bought a second house, and I've been helping him with that, moving in and stuff. Yeah, he's just really busy, but that's the way he is. He's like that. I'm a bit more lazy, to be honest, but there we are. But he will be making a return at some point, so keep your eyes open. Kent Catapults asks, will you ever use catapults for hunting if you put double TheraBand golds with 12mm lead balls, it would be more than capable? Yeah, I actually tried shooting. I've got a catapult, a Black Widow, and I actually did try shooting a video with it, and to be honest, I was so crap at shooting anything with it, I just had to bin the whole project at the end. It might be something I'll come back to, but I'll need to spend a lot of time practicing shooting it, because otherwise it's just embarrassing, to be honest. But yeah, I've no doubt that was kind of the point of the video, that even with steel balls, you're talking about 8 foot-pounds of energy. With lead balls, you could be talking up to 20 foot-pounds of energy, and that was kind of the concept of the video, to say, look, we're talking about air rifle licensing in Scotland, but yet people buy catapults, and then a lot of the time, much more powerful and deadly. But I kind of, as I said, kind of undermined that a little bit because I was crap at shooting it. So there we are. So that's it. I finally got through them all. Hope you enjoyed that. It sort of spaces things out a bit, really, with all the pigeon shooting lately. So yeah, I thought I'd knock this together. So I hope you enjoyed that. As I said, if you want to give me any more feedback, stick it in the comments. Like and subscribe.